What's poppin', people? It's Dante. Today we're going to be discussing 3 powerful street photography tips on how to work the scene, looking at 3 examples discussing patience, movement, and heart. And so these are the 3 example photographs that we're going to be looking at today, and we're going to just dive right into this. We've got some photographs, some contact sheets, and we're going to dive into how to work the scene. And so my first philosophy and my first tip for you is to don't leave the scene. Let the scene leave you, right? When you're out there and you're photographing in these particular environments where you see something interesting happening and you're making pictures, if you're watching something unfold, if you're watching somebody, for instance, like in this first scene, we have a street cleaner wiping down a window, I say make more photographs than less. Make more pictures. Don't leave. Let the scene unfold. You have to sit there with the scene. You have to watch no matter how mundane it may be, because sometimes you're going to have to wait for that perfect alignment where the light, the gesture, and the form synthesize in your composition. It's not going to happen in an instant, but sometimes it happens at the last second. Sometimes it happens in between moments. And I think that in order for you to improve your ability to make compelling images, you must be patient. You must be present in the moment when you're pressing the shutter and making pictures. And so if you see something and you have this sort of like sense of a possibility of a photograph and you see potential at a scene, you really want to stay until the scene leaves you. And this is a core philosophy for me when it comes to working the scene. I feel that ultimately patience is going to reveal the composition for you. And the more patient you are, the more rewarding it will be. And so look at this contact sheet. Look at how many different photographs that I made at this particular scene. You know, I was watching a very mundane thing. It was a simple street cleaner wiping down the glass pane, and I found it to be intriguing, and I was trying to position myself and the people in front of me in a particular way to create something more mysterious and less obvious. And so I was watching as the gesture of the man was sweeping and cleaning the glass, and I was waiting for the moment of interest, which was the moment where he goes to sweep. But I was trying to compose here in a way that adds a little bit more mystery from this mundane scene. And so as I continued pressing the shutter and as I continued watching this scene unfold, I simply allowed it to unfold naturally. And I literally stood there for the entirety of the time watching as he was cleaning and shining this window. And so you can see here in this particular contact sheet, we have the keeper photo where the man uses his hand to adjust the glass. And as he's adjusting, I reveal his hand and I eliminate the rest of the background by removing the rest of his body. We create a more mysterious and intriguing frame here. And so the moral of the story here is to be patient and to wait for things to align, because you never know what you're going to find in between those decisive moments that you're clicking the shutter at. You know, because sometimes it's not the one that's so obvious, but the moment that is in between the other moments. And I think when you're working the scene, you must be patient. You must be present and allow the scene to unfold naturally. And so in this particular instance, I was actually standing underground looking up at the window as the man was cleaning. And because of that, I was able to cut off the rest of his body in the composition to create a more mysterious frame of this hand looming over into the sky. And so I find that when you're working a scene, the key critical component that you must consider is patience. This is the first and foremost tip that I wanted to give to you, is to be patient. And you could see that contact sheet. I'm clicking the shutter, I'm moving, I'm adjusting, I'm switching my compositions up, but I'm waiting and I'm present and I'm just there and I'm prepared with my camera. And so another tip here that is really important, the second tip, is that photography has nothing to do with photography. It has everything to do with how you engage with humanity out there in the open world on the front lines of life. I mean, this to me is what it's all about. It's about you engaging with the world, and your particular interpretation of how you do that will reflect back in the photographs you make. And so photography has nothing to do with your compositional ability. Photography has nothing to do with the technicality. Photography has everything to do with how you engage with humanity. And this is first and foremost the most important thing that it comes to with photography for me, generally, I think. And so we're going to be looking at this photograph I made of a caretaker in the Fashion District Mall here in Philadelphia. And so we're going to be discussing courage and human connection here, where courage quite literally means heart. When you look at the Latin root of the word, cor meaning heart, to photograph, one must possess courage. One must have the audacity to approach people, to photograph strangers, and to engage with life. And so this to me is what's reflected back in the photographs you make. your courage, your heart. And so be a human first and a photographer second, right? Where the connection that you make with subjects can give emotion to the compositions you make. And so as I passed by these two people standing upon the wall in the Fashion District Mall, I was simply going for a leisurely stroll in a very seemingly mundane place, right? We have different shops. People are typically, they're coming from the subways, they're just walking about, and there's really nothing interesting going on here. And so I think with street photography, one must embrace the mundane and simply walk that same lane every single day, and you might find something new to say. And so on this particular day, as I was walking down the mall, just on some random day, this guy was doing some interesting movements with his hands and gestures. I think he was practicing Qi. I'm not really too sure or familiar with what this is, Tai Chi or Qi or something. And he was doing these movements, and he was with this friend of his that he takes care of in the background. And so I approached this guy, and I was speaking with him for maybe 30 minutes. And as we were talking, we got deeper and deeper in the conversation, and I started to make pictures of him as he was practicing his moves. And that was what caught my eye initially. And so I think it's important to not shy away from asking for permission, or not even asking for permission to make photographs, but just making a connection. I remember when I was walking down the mall and I saw this guy, I simply approached him and I asked him, "What are you doing? That looks pretty interesting." I talked about how I sort of got into yoga recently, and I was like, is this some sort of like yoga thing, or like what is this? I would just genuinely have never seen it before. And so as he was working and kind of just like hanging out with his friend, he was practicing some Qi moves. And as he was doing this movement, I simply approached him and spoke with him. And as he was doing the movement, and as I was chatting with him, I made pictures, right? And so as I'm making the pictures at this scene, and I'm engaged with the subject, and I'm engaged with humanity, just being open with my process and what I'm doing, the moments unfolded naturally, and I was patient working the scene, as you can see in the contact sheet. And so as he raised his eyes and his hands in this moment, I clicked the shutter at the decisive timing where he's in the foreground looking up at the light in relationship to his patient in the background, this very intimate, emotional scene. And this comes through being human first and being a photographer second, approaching people, engaging with humanity, and then allowing that emotion and allowing that connection, allowing your heart to reflect back in the photographs you make. And so when it comes to working a scene, don't shy away to interaction. This is a very critical component of my practice. When I see something interesting and I want to work a scene, I'm not afraid to engage with people. I'm not afraid to put myself out there on the front lines of life. This, to me, is what it's all about. It's about how you engage with the world. Photography has nothing to do with photography. It has everything to do with how you engage with humanity. And so composition is a result of where you position your physical body in relationship to the background, or to the subject in the background, and when you press the shutter. Okay, so this is a very simple idea, right? When you consider composition, it's very simple. Where you position yourself in relationship to the subject and the background, right? That's what a composition is. It's putting together the order in your frame through making yourself physically move into a scene by positioning your body low, by moving left, by moving right, where the movement that you possess as a photographer is going to ultimately influence the composition, right? You don't have to, zoom in with a zoom lens, but you simply move your 2 feet in relationship to the scene. And so when I approach this particular scene here in Paris, there's this woman who's standing atop of the wall here in the Eiffel Towers in the background. I discovered this composition through moving my body, through stepping back, through moving close, through moving left, through moving right, and then found myself in a sweet spot where the layers came together as people were moving through the scene, and that motion blur of the people moving on this night added mystery to the frame as people are entering the frame from the left and the right in these ghostly figures in relationship to this still woman in the background. And so I worked the scene. I saw something here. I had potential to make a photo of the Eiffel Tower. I arrived in Paris. I have 48 hours. And when you're in these particular scenes where you only have 48 hours at a particular location, you're going to want to work the scene so that you can increase your ability to make something. And so when I arrived at the Eiffel Tower here on this day, I spent the night trying to make a photograph because this is, a very quick trip. And so as I'm photographing the scene, I'm watching it unfold naturally. The woman was sitting atop of the ledge. Her friend was making photographs of her. And so I started to work the scene. And then as I noticed the way in which people were moving in and out in the foreground, I stepped back to the curb and allowed them to play in the frame and allowed them to enter the foreground in relationship to the subject in the background to create more depth, to create layers, to work with the sort of foreground of the man walking into the scene in blur, and the middle ground of the woman sitting on top of the ledge, and then finally the background of the Eiffel Tower, setting the stage, putting things together, creating order from the chaos in the scene. And remember that photography, and especially with composition, it really is deriving through your intuition when you press the shutter. But that's also a physical thing, right? Composition's a physical thing where you're moving your body left, you're moving your body right, you're positioning yourself in different ways to then find that sweet spot where things align from the foreground, middle ground, and background. And this comes through working the scene, through being patient, through being open, through engaging with humanity, and then being there and being prepared to press the shutter and physically positioning yourself in that sweet spot. And so this to me is the art of working the scene. It's all about patience. It's all about connection, and it's all about physical alignment to put together a composition. And so patience, movement, and heart, these are the three critical components that I remind myself of when I'm out there on the streets. I don't leave the scene until the scene leaves me, and I allow myself to move and change and adjust my physical body in relationship to the scene that I'm working to reveal the composition to me. And finally, engaging with humanity, because this to me is what it's all about. Photography has nothing to do with photography. It has everything to do with how you engage with life, and that's what reflects back in the photos you make. And so if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to check out DanteSisofo.com. I've got 3 free ebooks. We have the Ultimate Ricoh GR Street Photography Guide. I've got a Context Sheets book and a Mastering Layering in Street Photography Guide where you can learn about the art of layering. And so, yeah, that's pretty much it for this video today. Just some ideas about working the scene. I think that working the scene, it's probably one of the most important aspects of practicing street photography. With street photography, it's not just a one and done, run and gun. I think that method is valid and I use it pretty much all the time. But when you see something and you can sense the potential of something that's going to align, it's important for you to work the scene, to stay present, to engage with humanity and not leave the scene, right? You want to make sure that you pretty much milk the scene like as much as you can if something is interesting, if something has potential, and this will of course increase your likelihood of you making something interesting. So just really wanted to hammer this idea of working the scene today because I think it's probably one of the most important, I don't know, what would you call it? Like a technique, right? It's a technique, it's an approach, it's a philosophy of approaching the streets that I very much use throughout my journey, and just sharing it with you because I think it's a very useful tip. Just give it a go, try it out, and hopefully it can help you on your street photography journey. Peace.